After years of debate, the Wisconsin legislature sent an anti-gay marriage constitutional amendment to the voters. In November of 2006, the voters of Wisconsin approved the ballot question. Now, the Massachusetts legislature will decide if it happens here.
We met here as students at the University of Wisconsin. She was dating a rugby player. I played rugby. And when that relationship broke up, I moved in. This was a woman I met as a classmate in school. She was vivacious, she was attractive, she was fun to be with. We got along famously. We fell in love. I asked her to marry me, and when I was going through pilot training in Selma, Alabama, we got married.
During the campaign, my husband and I decided that if the amendment passed, we were going to leave Wisconsin. And there's a pretty short list of places that we could go, and it basically came down to either Massachusetts or Canada.
I've actually been a senator for 2 years, but I've only been in politics for 4. I was a state rep for about 18 months before I ran for state senate. And I'm having a great time. One of the reasons I didn't want to run, frankly, was the constitutional amendment. And I remember having conversations actually with the LGBT community and literally crying and saying to them, I feel strongly about this. This is about justice, but this isn't my issue.
I've lived in Massachusetts for 34 years. We have 5 children and we have 5 grandchildren. We have a daughter, Sophie, who's been together with Kristen for 10 years. They've been legally married since May of 2004. They have a son, Leo, who is 3.5 years old.
Leo's life is that every day he has 2 mums. And somebody's suddenly going to say, this is not right, you shouldn't have 2 mums, they're not legally married. This is ridiculous.
Wisconsin's had a long progressive tradition. We started the unemployment compensation program in every state in the country. We were at the forefront of women's suffrage, of a progressive income tax, of direct election of U.S. senators, all these progressive ideals. And for a long time, they were a part of the Wisconsin history.
We had this great love for each other, and yet there were people who lived together and didn't even like each other. And so we always considered ourselves very lucky. Richard, when he was 17, he convinced an unwilling father to sign the papers so that he could join the Navy during the war. And he did convoy duty on a tanker in the North Atlantic. And then they went on to Okinawa, where they came under kamikaze attack, along with the great ship, the Wisconsin, and they were in the same waters. He put himself voluntarily into harm's way for the people of his generation and all of those that followed. And it's ironic that people would feel that he ought not to have the same rights that they do.
My wife is Japanese. She's Japanese American. Her parents immigrated from Japan in the 30s. They had not seen very much of Japanese Americans in Alabama. Alabama's constitution had a prohibition against interracial intimacy, including marriage. They basically warned us that don't have any children while you're down here because, the state still feels like there's something illegal about having interracial marriage. But here in Wisconsin, when the whole issue of same-sex marriage came up, the issue came back to me in spades. It reminded me of how important it was that the Supreme Court had protected our individual liberties to choose who we wanted to live with and who we wanted to love, and that this was so similar.
I think that one thing that Massachusetts could learn from Wisconsin is that you just can't underestimate how difficult it is to beat one of these amendments. We had years to get ready, so we thought, okay, that's gonna be a real advantage. We knew that this was going to be a multi-million-dollar operation. We were able to raise the millions. It seemed like we had closed the gap, and that winning, with still a few months to go before the election, was within reach.
When I ran for state senate, my mother wasn't with me because my mother was with my opponent in the beginning because of my position on same-sex marriages. Can you imagine what it would be like going around and your mother not being supportive of you? She lived in the district. I actually am glad that we had that experience because it prepared me for the dialogue that I had to have on the entire issue of the constitutional amendment. It made me stronger in my stance to advocate for justice for all.
And not everyone knows this, but Wisconsin in 1982 was actually the first state in the country to pass a non-discrimination law on the basis of sexual orientation. Massachusetts was the second in 1989, but Wisconsin came first. And we thought, we've got it here. This is what we need. It's going to be a lot of work, but we've got the ingredients here to win.
But they probably spend on testing words probably as much as we spend on the campaign, ultimately. And they knew certain things were going to work.
A man, a woman, a child, a family.
It's definitely a Karl Rove sort of campaign. It's this undercurrent. You don't know exactly what's said and what's happening out there, yet it certainly was happening. It's done among their constituencies that they've already converted. So it's often done off of mail lists that we'll never know of or email lists that we'll never see. It's done in the churches on a Sunday morning, which is not part of usually political discourse. So despite the fact that we spent a lot of resources and did everything right politically, you look at how you put a political campaign together. You got almost every editorial board in the state in support, almost every political leader in the state in support. You had labor unions. You had groups that normally wouldn't take a position on a gay rights bill taking a position.